I'm gonna show you some magic. It's the real thing. I mean, it's all the real thing.
We've just got to a point where these people can't differentiate between reality and fiction.
It's normal to be told what beautiful looks like. But is it normal? We say no. We won't accept a world where any of this is normal. So we're removing the word from our products and advertising.
When I started this book, I thought, okay, biotechnology and CRISPR, it's the most amazing thing happening in our time. And then I realized by the end, I was understating the case.
Walter Isaacson is the author of best-selling books about Benjamin Franklin, Albert Einstein, and Steve Jobs. His latest, Doudna is a biochemist at the University of California at Berkeley. She and her collaborator, Emmanuelle Charpentier, won the Nobel for their 2012 work on a scientific breakthrough that's frequently described with words like miraculous. Scientists all over the world are exploring CRISPR's stunning potential to improve our lives. So do you think this biotech revolution will be as big in scope and impact as the digital revolution was?
Oh, I think the biotech revolution is going to be 10 times more important than the digital revolution because it allows us to hack the code of life. And we shouldn't be afraid of using this technology to make ourselves healthier.
But the thing is the deeper you go into biology, the more it shades into something that appears to be religious, because you start analyzing the fundamental structure of the psyche itself. And it becomes something, well, it becomes something with a power that transcends your ability to resist it. So
it's too upsetting to everybody else to call anything normal. I mean, this is insane.
This is insane, and you know, it's very unfashionable to be normal now. Everyone has to be different, which obviously is philosophically problematic, because if everyone's different, it just creates total chaos.
Whoa, we're officially in the future.
Dude!
What do you think? Here's real Tom on the left, fake Tom on the right. Can you see the difference? That's crazy. This scares me. The technology today.
Well, deepfake videos like this have been watched by millions of people over the last couple of weeks on TikTok, and you can see why experts are warning this could get very dangerous.
It's just evidence you can't believe your lying eyes anymore with the internet.
Potato heads, Mr. and Mrs. You gotta keep them together because they're madly in love.
Prepare to meet Mr. Angry Eyes.
Yeah, that's the end of Mr. Potato Head and Mrs. Potato Head, and this is one of the more frightening examples in the end, isn't it?
Back in October, Disney was praised when it decided to put disclaimers before some of its more problematic films. Why?
Rather than remove this content, we want to acknowledge its harmful impact, learn from it, and spark conversation to create a more inclusive future together.
It's what is it about society now where people are really looking for offense where there is none?
But now it's just like, you know what, you really have to use your critical thinking and critical seeing, because these people will fool you.
It uses artificial intelligence to analyze an existing photo, digitize it, and then apply techniques, apply algorithms to the photo to make it do things that it couldn't originally do.
Pitched as a way to bring life to old photos.
Another way to, bridge the distance, bridge time, and bring people together.
Yesterday, Hasbro announced it was removing the Mr. and Mrs. from the toys.
It's just a really sad indictment on where society has arrived at the moment.
We might have to ban all make-believe.
You know, as I said earlier, every week there's something else, and it's just getting to a point where it's almost impossible to keep up with.
Earlier this week, Dr. Seuss's Enterprises announced that they'd stop publishing some of the books from the author's collection because of racist and insensitive imagery.
5 other titles gone too, effective immediately. These books portray people in ways that are hurtful and wrong, says a statement from Dr. Seuss Enterprises.
Disney is rather selective in what diversity and inclusion they will champion. And Nick, it doesn't end there. Again, just this week we had eBay banning the reselling of those Dr. Seuss books that got banned last week, those 6 books that will no longer be published. You can buy Hitler's Mein Kampf on eBay, but not Dr. Seuss.
Stop politicizing toys and stop politicizing children. I think this is one of the most dangerous things that we need to be talking about.
Who's that protecting exactly? I just think this is a really dangerous territory to be going down.
But when you combine that with the increasing power and influence of artificial intelligence, do you create a recipe?
It is very much dependent upon right now what goes into it. It's the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. If you program biases into it, it will act in accordance with its programming. But as it gets smarter, as it gets better, you will see us move from this narrow AI to what's called artificial general intelligence. That's where the real danger lies in terms of what AI can do.
The girls are safe, healthy, as any other babies.
In 2018, a Chinese doctor edited the embryos of 3 Chinese babies so that they and their descendants would be resistant to the HIV virus.
I think we still need to understand the motivation for the study and what the process was for informed consent.
Scientists worldwide condemned him for going rogue.
In China, at first, for about a day, he was celebrated as the first person to create designer babies. But even the Chinese were appalled by what he did, and eventually he gets tried and put under house arrest.
Since that event, Doudna has been hosting a series of international conferences designed to hammer out ethical guidelines for using CRISPR.
I mean, everything Morgan's saying is spot on, right? That you have these dilemmas, and essentially what you really have with AI is you have something that's really an ethics dilemma, right? Because even when we get to the point of very advanced AI in the future that will ultimately, the goal, as he said, which is pretty scary, the goal of allowing machines to determine whether or not someone, for instance, is a terroristic threat, whether or not a target, an enemy target needs to be taken out, or a human life needs to be ended because the AI believes that. That all begins with the ethics of the creator. The AI creator essentially is imposing their own ethics. And so when you do have this race between China, the United States, and Russia over the control over AI, you're essentially imposing your own ethics into those computers and deciding what is of value and what is not. And I think there's a major question here that really is being ignored by so many of these superpowers around the world.
Right, because AI doesn't have its own ethical or moral code and compass. It's created by the human who's working on this technology.
Well, and that's really what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. So, this book I mentioned earlier talked about disagreements with my conceptualization of Christ, let's say, and I'm not sure what that conceptualization is, by the way, exactly. It's a mystery to me, but I can say some concrete things about it. I mean, I understand and appreciate the symbolic significance of the ideal human being, and that finds its embodiment. And I took these ideas in large part from Jung and Erich Neumann. That Christ is at least a representation of the ideal man, whatever that is. And we all, interestingly enough, we all seem to have an ideal. And that ideal has us, right? And that's where it's very interesting to consider the role of conscience, because your conscience will call you out on your behavior. And so it seems to function as something that's somewhat independent, or at least as something that you can't fully voluntarily control, because if you could voluntarily control it, then you just tell the pesky little bastard to go away, or to pat you on the back continually, because there must be few things in life more pleasurable than being a fully committed narcissist, to really believe that everything that you do is right and that you're a good person. And I suppose if you could wave a magic wand and rearrange your mind so that it was constantly telling you that, you'd do it, but you don't seem to be able to do that in relationship to your conscience. It trips you up. And that means that you have an ideal and you don't even know what the hell it is, but you certainly know when you transgress against it. And I know that there's a strong line of Christian thinking that's identified the conscience with divinity, sometimes with Christ inside, sometimes with the Holy Spirit. And those are very interesting conceptualizations, but you can think of them psychologically, and you can even think about them biologically. But the thing is the deeper you go into biology, the more it shades into something that appears to be religious. So you can think about Christ from a psychological perspective, and my critic, this particular critic that I've been reading, said, well, that doesn't differentiate Christ much from a whole sequence of dying and resurrecting mythological gods. And of course, people have made that claim in comparative religion. Joseph Campbell did that, and Jung to a lesser degree, I would say, but Campbell did that. But the difference, and C.S. Lewis pointed this out as well, the difference between those mythological gods and Christ was that there's a historical representation of his existence as well. Now you can debate whether or not that's genuine. You can debate about whether or not he actually lived and whether there's credible objective evidence for that, but it doesn't matter in some sense because it does, but there's a sense in which it doesn't matter because there's still a historical story. And so what you have in the figure of Christ is an actual person who actually lived plus a myth. And in some sense, Christ is the union of those two things. The problem is I probably believe that, but I don't know. I'm amazed at my own belief, and I don't understand it. Because I've seen sometimes the objective world and the narrative world touch. That's Jungian synchronicity. And I've seen that many times in my own life. And so in some sense, I believe it's undeniable. We have a narrative sense of the world. For me, that's been the world of morality. That's the world that tells us how to act. It's real. We treat it like it's real. It's not the objective world. But the narrative and the objective world touch. And the ultimate example of that, in principle, is supposed to be Christ. But I don't know what to... that seems to me oddly plausible.
Yeah.
But I still don't know what to make of it. It's partly because it's too terrifying a reality to fully believe. I don't even know what would happen to you if you fully believed it.
If you believed in the story of Christ, or if you believed that history and let's say the narrative meet, let's
both, I think. I think you... Because when you believe that, you buy both those stories. You believe that the narrative and the objective can actually touch.